as we were going through our discourse, we looked at the concept of coincidence. And after making it clear that coincidence is actually two incidents that occur in the same time and in the same place, we came to the realization that in reality, there was a cause to these events that occurred and to them coinciding. Today I told you and I promised you that we would take some time to cover chaos as well. Now, we need to understand chaos in several ways. First, we need to take a look at the layman's understanding of chaos, defining the term itself and how we normally use it in our everyday lives. And then, what we want to do is we want to take a look at chaos in science. As for chaos in terms of its definition, it's defined as when something is chaotic, then it is disorganized. And so, our usage of it as well in normal colloquial language also has the same meaning. So, when your mother enters your room and it looks disorganized, what does she say? She says, "Oh my goodness, this is so chaotic," right? "I can't handle this chaos." You need to organize your room. So then chaos becomes what? The opposite of organization. So chaos comes to mean disorganization. As for chaos in terms of, is it really a result of coincidence and randomness? It became clear to us, I believe, yesterday, that in actual fact, the reason why that room was chaotic wasn't because of randomness, but rather because somebody made a conscious decision to throw his pants under the bed, right? Not to do his bed, right? To have suhoor and place the pizza half-bitten under the bed, right? It didn't walk there and get there by itself, yes? And so based on that, Assalamu alaikum, doctor. And so based on that, we come to understand that in actual fact, this understanding of chaos is actually faulty. Right? There's a problem with it. Because chaos itself, if it means disorganization, then disorganization is a result of conscious decision making, right? And there's no coincidence or randomness in conscious decision making. Agreed? Even, by the way, unconscious decision making. So if a person is unconscious, right, and he ends up flailing his arms, for example, right, that is still a decision that was made, but what? By the natural forces within the body that caused these flailings to occur, right? Right? Because of the neurons, for example, firing, and this causes the muscle to, whichever muscle it may be, let's say of the arm, to move. Or for example, when you're sleeping, you might say, well, when I sleep, I tend to smack someone, whoever's sleeping next to me. Inshallah, this doesn't happen. Or if I get up and I walk during my sleep. There are causes for this to occur. This doesn't happen randomly or without a reason. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. So, chaos then, as we understand it, is not random as well. It is not without cause. Chaos, meaning disorganization, is a result of conscious decisions that are made or reasons or causes other than that. In this system, everything has a cause and an effect. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Now let's look at the scientific understanding of chaos. And for those of us who've studied physics, right, and taken the laws of thermodynamics, we know that chaos is depicted by the term entropy, right? Depicted by the symbol sigma. It's something's ability to become disorganized. The greater or the more chaotic, the more disorganized, the higher the entropy, the number of assigned to that sigma that I just mentioned. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree, right? Now the question is, where did we come to this understanding scientifically that something comes into disorganization if it is unorganized by someone? Okay. This came to us from a man by the name of Robert Brown, a scientist, a biologist in actual fact, who in his time, and I believe it was in the 1800s, where what he did was he had some pollen, he placed it on some water on a slide, he looked at it under a microscope, he noticed that the pollen was moving haphazardly in what looked to be a random pattern of motion. Okay? Now, if it was random, I don't know why we would assign the term pattern to it, but because pattern implies organization, right? So anyway, so that the pollen was moving haphazardly. And so he said, oh, so everything then goes to disorganization unless it is organized. Now, Einstein comes along a few years later, in the early 1900s, okay? And what does he do? He revisits this idea of Brownian motion. And he looks at it and he knows, being as smart as he is as a physicist and a mathematician, he thinks, well, hang on, every effect has a cause. Make sense? If it makes sense, say makes sense, right? Every effect has a cause. So it's got to be that something is causing this motion to occur. And what does he do? He uncovers that in actual fact, it was the water molecules that were bombarding the pollen at a specific acceleration and in a specific direction of motion that was causing the pollen grains to actually move at the speed that they were moving and in the direction that they were moving. And so not only did Einstein uncover the acceleration, the number of molecules, but also atoms. And so it became clear that in actual fact, Robert Brown did not know or was not aware of the fact that that this was a result of a cause, that it was an effect. Now, another two important scientists that are important to mention here are Edward Lorenz in the 1960s. He was a professor at Harvard. He studied atmospheric phenomena and climatic change. And at that time, in the early 1960s, people thought that atmospheric and climatic change was something that was random. What he uncovered was an algorithm through which you can actually predict climatic change. And he determined that in actual fact, every atmospheric and climatic change that we have has a cause, and that cause was unknown to us, and so we assumed that it was random because we didn't know, you see. And so he proved that in actual fact, just because we don't know that something is organized or the reason why it moves the way it moves or does what it does, he said that doesn't mean that we shouldn't assume, or that doesn't mean that we should assume that it's random. We should actually be patient enough and study it so that then we can uncover the reality that is behind that incident or that effect or that occurrence. Because ultimately in this world of cause and effect, it has to be an effect to a cause. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Next, we look at a man by the name of Benoit Mandelbrot. And of course, by the way, Edward Lorenz is the father of what is called the butterfly effect, which is the idea that if somebody sneezes in one side of the world, there might be a hurricane in the other side of the world. That's how media interpreted it for us. But that's not exactly what he said, right? But basically, the idea that everything basically has a cause and everything is interconnected in this world. The second important name as well, and by the way, it was Edward Lorenz that coined the term chaos theory. So in actual fact, chaos theory refers to the fact that everything is actually organized, right? Not that things occur randomly and are disorganized. Isn't that interesting? How media has changed the usage and how we have changed the usage in this world to imply that it was a result of coincidence. Next, Benoit Mandelbrot, right? 15 PhDs, held the seat of Einstein until he passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, right? And he is the father of fractal mathematics. And what did he study? He, in one of his PhDs, was studying how to measure the size of the UK. And when he looked at it, he said, well, how do I measure the jagged edges of the side of a body of a landmass that is being constantly bombarded by the ocean, right? By the sea. So now, logically speaking, we know that everything is created out of atoms, right? Agreed? So it's either compacted as a solid, or less compacted as a liquid, or even less compacted as a gas, right? So that means then, if that's the case, then everything moves and interacts with the other in a very organized way. Agreed? Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. So based on that, Benoit Mandelbrot, he also thought the same thing. So he studied this phenomenon, and he uncovers an algorithm as well, right? Through which he determines that everything really starts from a very small instance that is repeated over and over. So for example, water would not be the liquid that we see unless it's the repetition of what? Of the instance of H2O over and over and over. How many million molecules would end up allow us to see it in its form in a glass, right? Versus if it's dispersed in the atmosphere, we can't really see the water. Agreed? Yes? So he determines then as well that everything really is organized, right? And starts with an instance. So even when you see smoke, it's not haphazard. When the smoke is being pushed right and left, it's because of the motion of the wind. When the ocean waves are rising and coming down, it's the reason why is what? Is because of air pressure, right? Is because of the movement of the tectonic plates below the ocean, right? So there is constantly a cause to every effect. So Benoit Mandelbrot, what does he say? He says what we see as randomness is actually an extreme form of organization, agreeing with Edward Lorenz, and thereby proving that in actual fact everything is in a supreme form of organization, but we don't know it until we are able to reach in our technological advancements the ability to uncover this reality. You see? صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. So now we understand then coincidence, we understand randomness, we understand chaos, right? And we ask, what is the reason why people want us to believe that chaos exists in the way that they want us to believe it as randomness? We say the reason why is because they want us to think that this world came out of nothing, that there was no purpose to it, right? And as a result, what happens? As a result, we end up thinking this world and this life is aimless, because things can just happen without a reason, right? And so we live aimless lives, and we're looking for the media, right? And the moguls to control us as consumers, because we need to connect to something. So if we want to live aimless lives and connect to ourselves to consumerism, then we're going to believe that everything is random. But the reality is that nothing is random, that everything is part of an organized, supremely organized system. هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين والفاتحة على أرواح المرحومين مسبوقة مشفوعة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.